Deep and calm, his voice was pitched to dominate life, whether it be man or nature, and it did. He did. But then, Vittorio Marcello de Severano was a force of nature, a human being that inspired awe or fear in virtually everyone. There are solutions, he added softly, so softly that Jillian shuddered and took a nervous step away from him, putting her closer to the cliff's edge. Her unsteady footsteps sent loose rocks tumbling from the craggy point to the cove below. The falling rocks sounded like her heart shattering, and Jill's throat squeezed closed. Just when she'd felt secure. Just when she'd thought they were safe. Unbelievable. Impossible. None that I would find acceptable, she answered flatly, turning slightly but avoiding looking him in the face. She knew better than to look at Vit closely, much less meet his gaze. Vittorio was a magician, a virtual snake charmer. He could get anyone to do anything just by smiling. He was that handsome. He was that powerful. Is that all you have to say to me after months of cat and mouse games? The rain fell harder, drenching Jillian's thick-knit sweater so that it ran with rivulets of water. I believe everything has already been said. I can't think of anything I've forgotten, she retorted. Her chin tilted in defiance, even though her legs shook beneath her. She was torn between fury and terror. Vittorio was just a man, and yet he could and would destroy her world given the chance, and no one would stop him. I can. Let me suggest you begin with an apology, he said almost gently. It would be a start. Jillian threw back her shoulders and steeled herself against that deep, husky voice of his, forcing her gaze to his throat. What harm could there be in that? And yet it was impossible to look at his throat, strong and bronzed by sun, without seeing the square chin or the broad shoulders encased in charcoal black. And even limiting herself to that very narrow region, her stomach plummeted, because Vittorio was still everything that overwhelmed her. Impossibly physical and primal, he was the true alpha male. No one was stronger, no one more powerful. She'd tumbled into his bed within hours of meeting him, and she'd never done that before. For God's sake, she'd never even come close to making love before, but something about Vit made her drop her guard. With him, she felt safe. Near him, she'd felt secure. If anyone ought to apologize, it should be you. Me? You misrepresented yourself, Vittorio. Never. And you've hunted me like an animal for the past 11 months, she said, her voice hard, her tone clipped. She would not fall to her knees. She would not beg. She would fight him to the bitter end. He shrugged. You chose to run. You had my son. What else did you expect me to do? It must thrill you to have such power over helpless women and children, she flashed, raising her voice to be heard over the wind and the great angry walls of water crashing onto the beach below. You're far from helpless, Jill. You're one of the strongest, shrewdest women I've ever met, with the skills of a professional con artist. I'm not a con artist. Then why the alias of April Holiday? And how did you manage to create such a persona? It takes money and connections to pull off what you nearly pulled off. Nearly. That is the key word, isn't it? He shrugged again. That's for another discussion. Right now, I'd like to get out of the rain. You're free to go. I'm going nowhere without you, and I don't like you standing so close to the edge of the cliff. Come away. You worry me, he said, extending a hand to her. She ignored his hand and glanced up instead, her gaze taking in the long, lean jaw, the angled cheekbone, the very sensual lips above his firm chin, and all it took was that one glance for her to go hot, then cold, and hot all over again. And you terrify me, she answered bitterly, looking swiftly away, knowing that his lips had kissed her everywhere, exploring her body with mind-blowing detail. He'd brought her to her first orgasm with his mouth and tongue, and she'd been mortified when she'd screamed.